Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar, Looking After Injured Workers During COVID-19. My name's Kate Mahiris. I'm a Director of Regional Operations in Health and Safety here at WorkSafe Victoria, and I'll be your host for this morning's webinar. While our program of sessions this year is virtual, we still have the same aims of Health and Safety Month, and that is to keep you informed and up to date with all the information you need. Our theme this year is quite relevant, navigating through COVID-19. So I'd like to introduce our speakers this morning. We're going to have a conversation around navigating through COVID-19. Lucas Kowalski is the manager of our Return to Work team at WorkSafe. Good morning, Lucas.
Good morning, Kate. How are you going?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And Scott Anderson is a Senior Return to Work Inspector with WorkSafe Victoria. Morning, Scott.
Morning, Kate.
Excellent to have you both here. We've structured this session as a conversation between myself, Lucas and Scott, and we're going to focus on how COVID-19 is affecting many people's return to work and how WorkSafe is supporting that return to work and also the employers who are responsible for that. So just a few housekeeping matters before we get started. If you want to be part of the social media conversation, please use the hashtag HSMonth. If there's any information that you hear about today that you'd like to get more advice or information on, you can visit our website or contact our advisory service. So let's get into it then. A smooth and fast transition back to work, even if it means injured workers with a reduced capacity, can help improve their own productivity and well-being, keep the cost of an employer's WorkSafe premium down, and boost the general health and morale of all people in the workplace. Our return to work approach at WorkSafe has not fundamentally changed during COVID-19. And even though many businesses have remobilised their workforces or perhaps shut down, return to work obligations are still a key part of businesses, so far to the extent reasonable. So could I start by asking you, Scott, with the first question? Could you give us a brief outline of how COVID has affected injured workers and employers?
Sure, thanks, Kate. Well, look, we've found that COVID has really been a very challenging environment, obviously, for everybody to navigate. Particularly, we found that employers have found it really difficult to find duties to provide to workers, which makes it really challenging for the whole process to proceed. So we found that while the landscape's changed, the fundamentals of effective and best practice return to work really haven't. So that's been our key messaging, is to make sure that employers still have the opportunity to keep injured workers engaged and connected. Keeping the workers connected process, and we'll talk a bit about consultation this morning, but it really is so critical to make sure that those workers that have capacity stay engaged, keep that capacity physically and mentally to make sure that they're ready once the businesses reopen. So we've particularly found that focusing on wellbeing and psychological wellbeing, even for physical claims, is a key component of navigating this COVID environment.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And Lucas, if I come to you now, I understand you have some data to share with our viewers this morning around what is happening with return to work during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kate. So I guess we have continued to receive claims for compensation despite workplaces closing, but really specifically to COVID, I think we've early on in the piece, so probably around March, we started to identify injured workers who had returned to work. But then because of workplace closure, they had to stop work. So since then, we've identified just over 800, and they're the workers that we really want to support because they have a capacity, but they couldn't continue working because of the workplace closure. Since then, about 300 or so have made a return to work. We still have just under 500 who have a capacity for work, so they can participate, but the workplace is closed. And our real focus has been on supporting those workers, really because we do want them to become, to stay work ready and be able to make a return to work as their workplace reopens, as restrictions ease.
And so, Lucas, I understand your team work really closely with our agents who actually manage the workers' compensation claims on behalf of WorkSafe. What have you been doing with them to support how they work with injured workers directly?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely with the agents. We've also had a multifaceted approach across our occupational rehab panel and even with our treating health practitioners. But I guess starting with the agents, we wanted to ensure that the key support services that we could deliver before COVID, that we could continue to deliver them during COVID. So one of our main support services is mobile case management, which is predominantly a face-to-face visit with the injured worker, the employer, and also the treating health practitioner, so like a GP or a physio. We had to work closely with the agents so that they could pivot very early on in March and continue to deliver those services virtually. So doing a video conference with the GP and the injured worker, and also with the employer where possible. With our occupational rehab providers, very similar. Most of their work will occur in a face-to-face on-site setting at a workplace perhaps. So we partnered with them closely to ensure that they could conduct a workplace assessment with an employer over the phone, visually via video conference where possible as well. We've seen an increase in case conferences with the treating health practitioner, so with a physiotherapist, with the GP, and also with the injured worker, and that has been about ensuring that the worker is continuing to access appropriate treatment. I guess finally, it's about the future piece as well for us. So thinking about injured workers who are currently not working due to COVID because their workplace has shut down, considering whether or not there's any retraining that they can undertake to help them be best positioned for future return to work as well. So I guess the key message has been it's been a multifaceted approach amongst a number of stakeholders.
Yeah, excellent. And sounds like a real team approach as well. Scott, if I can come to you now, you're a return to work inspector. You talk with employers every day. That's your role. So what have you been doing with employers, I guess, and sort of what are your messages today for those who are listening in?
Yeah, okay, no worries. Well, in the Return to Work Inspectorate, we've been spending a lot of time really educating employers, helping them understand that even though the environment's changed, the obligations around return to work are still there. So best practice is for employers to still maintain that consultation with their workers and with the workers' treaters where they can, to try and get an understanding of where the worker's at and what a start point for a return to work would look like. Specifically, we've been looking at issues around businesses and their reopening plans, making sure that the workers are factored into that process so that they can still consider, what are we going to do with this worker when we do reopen? So how are we going to make sure that they are integrated as soon as we can possibly get them back? Having that information, the relevant medical information is important, considering what supports and modifications they can provide at the workplace. These are really good things to do if your business is closed, to do those planning steps now while it's closed, so that when you reopen, you're better prepared to focus fully on what you want to do with your business moving forward, as well as providing that support for the worker, because the groundwork's already been laid. I guess the flip side of that is that there are some businesses that unfortunately aren't going to reopen during these periods. And we've really been making sure that those employers are aware that there are still support services available there for workers to make sure that they're not just left behind during that process.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So you mentioned that support service, and Lucas, I understand that you've got a case study that you'd like to share with the webinar this morning around this specific type of support service for workers when their businesses don't return.
We do, yeah. So predominantly our occupational rehab services are very much in the return to work and redeployment space. But when COVID commenced, we had to introduce a new service. So it's called Recovery Support Service. And I guess the real, the purpose is to engage injured workers where their return to work goals currently aren't the priority. And it is about their non-vocational goals. So this particular example is an injured worker. His name's Cade. He was a plumber installing air conditioning units. So back in December, he was installing this air conditioning unit on the roof of a building, and whilst he was carrying the unit up, he's injured his back. So he had to cease work in December. He was able to make a return to work in February this year, and that was in support of his employer and a return to work plan that was drafted. As COVID started to, I guess, impact business operation, his employer was no longer able to offer those suitable duties. So this is an example of an injured worker who has a capacity for work but can't remain at work because of COVID-19. Our existing services weren't probably the most appropriate to continue in this case, so the recovery support service was referred for this injured worker. And the purpose is really on, as I mentioned, non-vocational goals, and also keeping that connection with the employer and that engagement piece as well. So what the provider did here was really help Cade set up a routine for his day-to-day. Cade was sitting at home without the opportunity to go to work, so it was about his day-to-day routine, exercise, rehab, and also some goals around the house that he could start focusing on. So there was some kind of structure for him. I guess the benefit for Cade that he reported through to us was in the mental health space as well, because he didn't find himself, I guess, ruminating about what was happening, and also felt that there was some structure to his week as well. And Kate is still off work. I guess we're waiting for some of the restrictions to ease, but he's got some support that is a bit targeted for his needs. I guess that's the way the recovery support service can be something that employers and injured workers can access as well.
Yeah, wow. What a really nice story to hear about. So, Scott, I might come back to you now. You mentioned earlier you were going to talk a bit more about consultation, and I'm getting a sense that it's quite crucial. I would like to run a scenario by you just to learn a bit more about that. So, just say I run a small business. I have someone who is working 2 days per week on a return to work due to injury. We had to close, pardon me, we had to close. And so he had to stop that return to work plan. What could I be doing to keep him both physically and mentally, as Lucas mentioned, ready to return to work when I reopen? Do you want to give us some advice in that space?
Sure. Look, we'll act as though Lucas is your injured worker. That way we can put a face to the name. So what I'd recommend is that you consult with Lucas regularly. Make sure Lucas understands, how frequently you're going to get in contact, what sort of contact, whether it's email, phone calls, how does he want communication through to him? And then get an understanding from Lucas what exactly his capacity is at this point in time. So get an understanding of, all right, it was 2 days a week before we shut. Right now you're going through, what treatment are you having? Are you progressing with your recovery? What are we going to look at when we potentially reopen? So get a starting point in mind. It might be that 2 days a week that you want to look at for a return to work. All right, that's great. What else can you look at? What's the next step of that return to work program? So what are we going to do to make sure that Lucas stays engaged? All right. When you're talking with Lucas, making sure you're keeping the consultation positive, so he understands what's involved, what the workplace is doing to support him, and he feels like he hasn't been forgotten during this period. The difficulty that we have is that we have some workers that they understand there's difficulties happening at their workplace, but they don't know what's going on. So that creates a big mental barrier for them in terms of being disengaged from the workplace. We want to break that down and make sure that the worker's fully informed with the difficulties that are happening on site, but also the positives and how soon they could reopen, what plans are happening to help the business, because they may have great ideas in terms of what could help, what duties may be available for them when they return, all of these things that people just won't know without that consultation piece.
I feel very well supported now as that small business. So let's keep this up. Lucas, you don't get away scot-free. I'm going to give you a scenario now. And let's say Scott is my employee. I've offered Scott some alternative work. He had been injured and now we've reopened. The restrictions are easing, but he doesn't want to come back to work. What should I do in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it happens more often than not. And I think even going back to what Scott mentioned and you've called out a couple of times, it probably is where the expectations of the employer and the injured worker differ. And I guess then when the return to work plan's been proposed, it hasn't been successful. So really that communication engagement piece. And a recent example I can give of this is where an employer reached out for some support through one of our agents. They'd proposed a return to work for an injured worker, and it did require them to wear a face covering for 8 hours during the day. And I guess their concern was that the injured worker indicated they couldn't do that because it would make them feel claustrophobic. And the employer's comment was, well, how is the injured worker able to go out shopping? And I guess that's about that consultation and even the reasonableness of return to work, because one wouldn't perhaps consider someone to wear a mask for 8 hours if they were going out shopping. So it's about the communication and engagement piece there as well.
And so can you expand, though, a bit more on some other practical things? You clearly have a lot of experience in this space, Lucas. What are some other practical things employers should be thinking about in that scenario?
I think even before a return to work plan is drafted by the employer, have a look at the certificate of capacity. So a work cover certificate is required by an injured worker if they are claiming weekly payments and as part of their return to work. And within that document, the GP or the physiotherapist or the relevant practitioner will list down the specific restrictions for that injured worker. And then the employer can start thinking about, well, can they find suitable duties that fit those restrictions? I guess if they can't, or if they're not sure, then their first port of contact can be their agent. An agent can organise a mobile case manager to come and visit you if it's safe to do so, and to start helping you with the return to work plan. And likewise, they can even organise a case conference with the injured worker, the GP, and you as the employer as well, and then collectively you can work on that return to work plan. If it requires a bit more specialist support, then occupational rehab can be offered. And that's where a consultant will come to the workplace or virtually assess the workplace and really provide you some guidance as to what duties you could consider as part of that return to work plan. It is also important to ensure that the return to work plan is updated regularly and it is current, and that all parties involved have a copy of that return to work plan. I think we take for granted that we assume that someone has a copy, but making sure that everyone does have a copy of that document and it is clear is really the first step in that consultation space as well. And I guess really, as you know, going back to what Scott's mentioned, just checking in on that individual, asking them what they think they could potentially do in the workplace as well. And it's really about that collaboration between all the stakeholders as well.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm hearing that consultation crucial factor as well, which is a great message for today's listeners. But in regards to sort of final messages, can I ask Scott, perhaps what sort of a takeout message that you'd like the viewers of today's webinar to walk away with?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess the key message for me is that even if the business is closed or if you're not able to provide duties right now, we understand that the environment's difficult. Make sure that you continue to maintain the principles of return to work planning. So continue to keep in touch with the workers, continue to try and keep in touch with the treaters where you can, have an idea of commencement points for return to work plans, and make sure you communicate that information so that people are aware that there are things happening that they can't see, to ensure that when they're able to come back to work, that they're able to.
Yeah, excellent. And Lucas, for you, a takeout message today for our viewers?
I mean, we've spoken about, you know, what the employer must do, and there is an obligation to plan for return to work. But I guess I want them to hear that they're not alone in that process. I think that our agents have a number of support services they can leverage. We've got our occupational rehab panel as well, and obviously, you know, the relevant support at WorkSafe. So it's, I guess, making use of those support services. And if an employer has a question, I think please just reach out to your agent. They'll have specialists that can support you with that process as well. But definitely that, although you know you're the employer and you engage with your injured worker, there are support services that can help you along the process as well.
Yeah, excellent. Some great takeout messages. So thanks so much, Lucas and Scott. It's been a great conversation this morning. It's great to hear that WorkSafe has a lot of support there. And I love it, what you said, Lucas. You're not alone. Reach out to us. We definitely want to ensure that all Victorians are supported during these really tough times of the pandemic. On screen shortly, there will be some information about the Recovery Support Service, links that you can go to find out more information. So please access that information as you need to. If you need any further advice or assistance, as the guys have pointed out this morning, your agent is often a really good place to go to. Our advisory service is also available, and you should contact that at WorkSafe. So thanks so much for tuning in today, and I hope everybody has a great day.